Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, we closed out the week last week talking about Raiders defensive goals, what they should be for 2023. Well, how about the defensive leader, Maxx Crosby? What's next for him? That plus a whole lot more comes up on Monday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, July 10th, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won, and won, and won, and won, and won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show. Of course, if you're checking us out on YouTube, as always, that's because of my guy Ari. Does a great job each and every day making sure we're looking good and sounding good on YouTube. You can check him out on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up on Twitter as well at your boy Q254. And of course, we've got that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line wide open like some old school TV antennas. I say it all the time, 707-654-4693. Make sure you put that number in your phone, lock it in, and know that when you call, if you do call and leave a message, you've got 3 minutes. It'll give you 3 minutes and then it'll cut you off. So whatever you got to say, get it in. I prefer it to be a little bit quicker than that, but if you have to go a little bit lengthy, make sure it's 3 minutes max. If not, it's going to cut you out. You could always hit us up with a text as well. Again, 707-654-4693. Your calls and texts will come up in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Segment number 2, want to really turn my attention to Maxx Crosby. And it's funny, we were talking about defense at the end of last week, and then my man Ted Wynn from The Athletic actually put out a piece on Maxx Crosby. And it's funny, we have been talking back and forth, texting back and forth for 3 or 4 days about this piece in anticipation of it coming out. He actually got to sit down and break down film of Maxx Crosby with Maxx Crosby. So really good stuff. I encourage you to check it out on The Athletic. Raiders Maxx Crosby breaks down how he transformed into a complete defensive force. We'll talk about that. You'll hear from Ted coming up in segment number 2 of the show. Here in segment number 1, always like to hit you with the news and notes, and really just want to continue to focus on the fact that training camp, first day of practice is the 26th, so now we're 16 days away from actual football activities. So you see some of the Raiders are still holding their camps. I saw Jermaine Illuminor was actually going to England, flying to England on Sunday to make sure he went and held a football camp. They're really getting the last of their vacations in right now before it is a go, before they hit training camp. First day of practice, as mentioned, is the 26th. The veterans report on the 25th, and the rookies report on the 20th. So we'll continue to update you on that as it rolls along. And also, more importantly, right now, we're on Josh Jacobs' contract watch. Again, July 17th is the day that we're paying attention to. Can he get that long-term deal done? And now we're only a handful of days away. I mean, this time next week, we'll be talking about, is it going to get done today? Or is he going to end up having to settle for the 1-year franchise tag? But on Friday on my radio show, on Raider Nation Radio 920, Unnecessary Roughness, actually had longtime super agent Leigh Steinberg on the show, and he was talking about an agent academy that he was having here in Las Vegas, and he did it last year, and he's going to do it again this year. Matter of fact, yesterday, Sunday, today, and tomorrow is the days that he's actually having this academy. But I thought, what better time to ask about Josh Jacobs and his contract than with the guy who's had plenty of contract negotiations through the course of his great career, again, with Leigh Steinberg. So the first question I asked him was about the running back position and how it's devalued so much over the years.
And it's strange because this started, 15 years ago, where different people in scouting and administration in the NFL said, well, we can find a running back in the 5th round or the 3rd round that'll be just as good, and they don't play very long. And all that combined to take a position that's really still critical because without a running game, your passer is at severe risk of being dismembered and making it less than that position used to be paid. When I started, running backs were right there with quarterbacks, but now 4 positions in free agency have come to the fore, and it's the quarterback always, left tackle or tackle for blindside, an edge rusher, and a shutdown corner or safety. And those players are hard to find in the draft. They rarely get out if they're talented in free agency. And running backs were, for example, tackles went up greatly in value. Offensive guards went down with this new system.
So there's the great Leigh Steinberg right there. Again, I mean, this dude is super agent for many, many great athletes, including Patrick Mahomes in the NFL. But he's been around for a very long time, and he's very good friends with Mark Davis and the Raiders organization. And it's just, it's just funny how he said that even, 15 years ago is when the running back position started to lose its value. So the final soundbite I want you to hear from him has to do with negotiating. How would he negotiate a franchise tag player like Josh Jacobs with a front office, knowing that the player is a running back and that value is so low, but the player means so much to the team on and off the field?
It reminds me years ago when I was doing Thurman Thomas, who went to the Hall of Fame for Buffalo, and I tried to work out what percentage he was of the offense to argue that he ought to be paid like a quarterback. Well, we never got there, but we got much more than running backs are paid. So you have to make the argument, both in the running game, blocking, and receiving, how invaluable that player is. Incidentally, one of the things we're doing at the Agent Academy is we're going over to the Raiders Stadium and having a tour, and then we're having the public relations head, Will Kiss,
yeah, Will,
is going to do an interaction with the young people. The only team I ever actually owned season tickets for was the Raiders.
Yeah.
Starting when I was in law school, and then when they came to L.A., and then when they went back. So, and I used to sit in the top row in the early days in Oakland next to the young guy whose name was Mark, and we cheered and yelled and everything. And that was Mark Davis, and now he owns the team.
So I thought that was good stuff, and he starts talking about Thurman Thomas and when he did those negotiations. And, again, I mean, think about Thurman Thomas as a Hall of Famer, but as an agent, that's what you have to do. I think that was a really good point that he brought up about how much does he mean to the organization. What percentage of plays was he in on? And, again, I've said it so many times when it comes to Josh Jacobs and what he did in 2022, 393 total touches. And that's just touches. That's not in blocking. That's not, doing anything else that he did. Again, off the field. I mean, the dude is a leader on and off the field. But, I mean, he's just so critical to the success of this team. It's going to be interesting to see down the stretch how this contract negotiation goes. Does he get a front-loaded 2 or 3 year deal, or does he literally have to end up settling for the 1 year, $10 million fully guaranteed franchise tag? Of course, that's coming up 17th. That's the date. Today's the 10th, so it's happening quick, fast, and in a hurry. And the final soundbite I want you to hear for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, kind of news and notes gathered over the weekend, has to do with Mad Maxx Crosby. And I think that's perfect because we're going to be talking about Maxx Crosby coming up in segment number 2. But Phil Villapiano, the great Phil Villapiano, is a big fan of Maxx Crosby. So as I was scrolling through Twitter over the weekend, saw this quick little message from Fu to Mad Maxx Crosby. Check it out.
Hello, Max. I just want you to know that I'm checking in on you. I'll be there in a couple of weeks for Alumni Weekend. I want you to be out of control just like you were the last time. I could not believe, and I've told all of Raider Nation that I talked to, how you ran from drill to drill to drill to drill. And these other jerks don't keep up with you. Get rid of them. You are the man, Max. I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Now, you want to talk about a good guy to talk to. Any opportunity I get to talk to Phil Villapiano is always fantastic. Now, it's always dangerous when you have him on the radio because you never know what he's going to say, right? So you got to have the dump button ready, but Fu is fantastic, right? I mean, he is great to talk with. He's a guy that is very fired up and energetic and passionate about his Raiders, loves him some Mad Maxx Crosby. So in the next few weeks, he'll definitely be a guest. I either have him on the radio show or strictly on the podcast. Maybe I'll catch up to him at Alumni Day when they're out there at a training camp in a few weeks, as he mentioned to Maxx Crosby. But love the fact that he's so energetic and passionate about the silver and black, and notices what I've said multiple times on this show, that Maxx Crosby drilled the drill. It runs. He's the first one over there, puts his foot on the football to make sure everyone knows that, hey, I was here first. And he's getting, even though though Fu said that the other guys aren't doing it, he's getting guys to do it too. Compete station to station, compete station to station. Like, that's something that is important, and I'm interested to see how that translates in training camp when the 26th happens, when the first day of practice happens, and it's blazing hot. It is 111 out, consistently here in Vegas. Of course, they'll be practicing super early in the morning to try to avoid some of that heat, but you can't avoid it, right? We wake up sometimes at 5:30 in the morning, it's already 90 degrees. So no matter how early you get up, it's still going to be hot out. So I want to see how much that continues to, translate station to station, all that competing and Maxx Crosby running. I have no doubt he's going to keep doing it. I'm interested to see what other players will do it along with them. So that's all I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Again, kind of news and notes gathered over the weekend. Of course, there's not a lot going on right now in the NFL until practice actually starts. And for the Raiders, that'll be on the 26th. Coming up in segment number 2, going to talk about Mad Maxx Crosby and what is next for him in year 5, a guy who just continues to grow and grow and grow and get better. So we'll talk about that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is LinkedIn Jobs. And these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. All you got to do is post at LinkedIn.com and then post your ad with your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools, screening questions. They make it real easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and who you'd like to hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Again, post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to talk all things Mad Maxx Crosby. And it's funny, on my radio show on Friday, I really dove deep into the conversation of Maxx Crosby. And it wasn't because I had planned on it originally. What happened is the NFL had put out a video, about a 1.5, 2-minute video, talking about Maxx Crosby and the fact that he led the league in tackles for losses in 2022 with 22, as a matter of fact. And it was pretty funny because I quote tweeted that. And again, it wasn't, to flex on anybody. It wasn't anything. It was just a, kind of tip of the cap to Maxx Crosby. And I just said something to the extent of Max is a beast and continues to get better each and every year. And that's all of a sudden when I got a reply from a guy named Johnny who follows me on Twitter. He doesn't have any kind of picture on Twitter, so he's kind of anonymous, but his name is Johnny. He follows me on Twitter and he says, well, he's almost. And I didn't know what he meant by that. So I said, well, I replied, almost what? And then he says, he almost gets home, almost wrecks the game, almost converts that spin move, almost keeps his balance. If he puts it together, he could be Defensive Player of the Year, hopefully this year, and the Raiders, unfortunately, will still blow. Have a good one. That is from Johnny. And so I bring that up because that really made me deep dive into Maxx Crosby a little bit more, knowing how good he is and what he means to the silver and black. And does that mean he can improve? He doesn't have any room for improvement? No, he absolutely can improve. But I just went back and I'm like, wait, hold on. The dude had 12.5 sacks. Right? He led the league in tackles for loss with 22. I mean, he had an incredible stat line. I got it written down right here. 12.5 sacks, 22 tackles for loss, 89 total tackles, 3 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, and he blocked a field goal. So I'm like, I don't really know, Johnny, what you want him to do. What else do you want him to do outside of that? And oh, by the way, he did it with no help whatsoever. And, I mentioned on Friday's show about the article on NFL.com about if there was going to be an MVP that was not a quarterback for every single team, who would it be? And for the Raiders, it was Maxx Crosby, right? I went into that. And then it just so happened that Ted Wynn's piece from The Athletic dropped on Friday as well. Again, I had talked to him for a few days knowing that it was going to drop. First, it was supposed to drop on Wednesday. The editor pushed it back to Thursday. Then they decided to push it back one more day, which is fine, right? They get that traction over the weekend. Makes a whole lot of sense. So I had Ted as a guest on my radio show because, look, I'm looking at Max, and I know a guy that continues to strive to get better each and every year. What does he want to do? What's that next goal? He's always working. He barely takes any time off to kind of rest and recuperate and get back, kind of get his body right after the season. I mean, he's always just grinding. So for me, when I'm looking at what's next, I'm looking at, especially now that he looks like he has help, and that's going to be the biggest key. If these defensive guys that the Raiders have brought in can actually help Maxx Crosby, he's going to be that much better, right? So I'm looking at least 15 sacks. And that's just because I think that he's going to be able to be fresher towards the end of games and get home a little bit more because, again, the other team can't just focus in 100% on Maxx Crosby because a guy like Tyree Wilson should be there to help out. Hopefully a guy like Chandler Jones is there to help out. Hopefully the secondary is better and make the quarterback hold the ball an extra second and allow a guy like Maxx Crosby to get back. Hopefully the linebackers can cover, right? If these guys can actually step up their game and assist Maxx Crosby, he could easily be in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. And I think that that's the next goal for him. He sets goals for himself every year. And I think that that's the next goal for him is to be in serious consideration for Defensive Player of the Year. And the way I think he gets that, he has to have at least 15 sacks. He's got to force a couple fumbles. He did that in 2022, 3 forced fumbles and a fumble recovery plus a field goal to block. But I think he, more importantly, needs to close out games. Like when the Raiders need to have that big play, you know, like say week 2 against the Cardinals when, you know, Kyler Murray is scrambling around and he's trying to get to the end zone and Maxx Crosby comes down and pulls him down, sack or tackle for loss or whatever the case may be, you know, or breaks up the pass attempt to the end zone, right? Seal the deal type movement. Against the Rams, you know, that Thursday night game when the Rams went the whole length of the field and scored that touchdown, right? He's got to make that play. And it's funny, when I said that on my radio show on Friday, I had a guy, Bernard, call in. He brought up a good point. He's like, Q, he makes those plays. He makes those plays now, but more times than not, there's a penalty on someone else. Or there's, you know, he makes the quarterback get the ball out of his hand quickly and is floating, and then the Raiders don't make the play on the back end. Like if the ball's just up there floating, they don't go and make that interception. And then he pointed out when Jarrett Stidham was intercepted in overtime by the 49ers. Remember when he got hit and the ball floated? What did the 49ers do? They came up with that play. So he said, I think he makes those game-closing plays, but the rest of the team doesn't step up and do their job, and so it goes for naught. And I think that he has a very valid point on that. But with that being said, if you're going to be in the running for Defensive Player of the Year, you've got to make those plays. Those plays have got to stand out. And your teammates do have to help you out, just like Bernard said. So he brings up a good point. But that's what I think is next for Max. 15 sacks. He had 12.5 last season. I think 15. And some of those game-changing plays, some of those that seal the deal at the end. But, again, that's going to be up to the Raiders' defense to also step up and help him out. So Ted Wynn, as I mentioned, was a guest on my radio show on Friday on Raider Nation Radio 920 on Necessary Roughness, and his piece is out right now. Raiders Maxx Crosby breaks down how he transformed into a complete defensive force. So one of the first sounds I want you to hear from Ted is just about the experience of sitting down, breaking down film with Maxx Crosby, what he took away from it.
It was probably one of the more insightful conversations I had with a player. I think sometimes when it comes to like talking strategy or, talking about real detailed football things, some people could be guarded because they don't want to give too much away to their opponents. But, I think he was really open about his process and how he plays. And I think he plays such an unorthodox game that, you're not going to be able to get a beat on what he's doing just based on reading these things. He's so instinctual, and the way he prepares allows him to make these plays that you just don't see a lot of defensive ends make. I mean, you don't see a lot of I don't know if he weighs 255 pounds right now, but that's how much he weighed coming into the NFL, which is 11th percentile amongst edge defenders. We don't see guys that are lighter just become so dominant against the run very often, and Crosby has become that because he's so relentless and he's so smart when it comes to reading plays. And in our interview, he talked about a lot about how much he emphasizes stretching. Like he stretches every single day, 365 days a year, and you can see that come into play when he's playing because he bends and gets into all these weird positions that you normally wouldn't think somebody could get into, but he does, and that's how he flips blocks. So it's just a really cool interview that shed a lot of light on how he became such a complete player.
So there's Ted Wynn from The Athletic right there, just on the experience of sitting down, breaking down film with Maxx Crosby, which I can only imagine was awesome. When I saw the tweet that he put out and it was a picture of him and Max breaking down film, I just knew the article was going to be a really good one, and it is. So, again, I encourage you to go check it out on The Athletic. But, again, as mentioned, even in the article, the name of it, how he breaks down how he transformed into a complete defensive force. Remember, Raider Nation, when he was drafted in the 4th round, John Gruden said your number one goal is what? To get into the weight room with Deuce Gruden, right, and put on some weight. So I asked Ted, how has Maxx Crosby gone from being that 4th round pick, whose goal was to get there with Deuce Gruden and just kind of gain some weight and gain some muscle mass, to now being one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. And, oh, by the way, a guy that's really good at stopping the run as he improved in that in 2022.
I think he just has a relentless mindset. A lot of guys say that, but I really believe Crosby when he talks about, how intense he trains. He wants to be number one in everything, whether it's just warming up, whether it's a drill, whether he's conditioning. He wants to be the first guy there. One of his goals in 2021 is just related to the number 100. And he wanted to go 100% in everything he did. He wanted 100 pressures. He got 100 pressures. He wanted 100 million. And he almost got 100 million with his contract. So I just really believe like he has that Kobe mentality, for lack of a better term, where everything he does, he's going 100%. And you just see that improvement year to year, and you see how he's gotten to being one of the premier defensive players in the league now because of his work ethic.
So, again, it goes back to Maxx Crosby. It goes back to his work ethic. It goes back to what he believes in and the fact that he grinds all year long and wants to be the best that he can be. And I really honestly could appreciate that. And it's funny because it goes back to the Raider Roundtable conversation that we had on Raider Content Day when it was JT the Brick, Eric Allen, and myself. And we talked to Maxx Crosby for about 17 or 18 minutes. And I remember specifically asking him, and I'll let you hear it right now. I asked him what's next. What is he working on? Because he's always working on something. He tells us that all the time. And this is what he had to say, and let you know how important it is for him to continue to grow as a player.
Yeah, honestly, I'm so far from where I want to be. Not only, from a personal standpoint, but as an organization, I want to win. That's the number one thing. I literally start in January and I don't stop until January. And I want to be playing in February. I want to be playing in the biggest games. I want to be on TV. I want everyone to see the work I'm putting in and see what this team is doing. And, I take a lot of pride in that. And, obviously, the money and all that's cool, but that's not why I started playing football. I started playing in second grade. I've been playing my whole life. Yeah. This is what I want to do. This is my legacy. I feel like God put me on earth to play football and be an example of overcoming adversity. And I truly believe this is just the beginning for me. I feel like I'm going to take a whole nother step this year. And in these next 5 to 7 years, I'm really going to be entering my prime and being the best version of myself. And that's why I take it so serious. That's why I talk about my craft and my work ethic. And I really talk about it because I take it so serious and I do it on a daily basis. And that's all I know. And I really want to maximize my career at the highest level. And that's why I put so much into it. And, I feel like, my legacy at the end of the day is the most important thing. What I leave, when I'm done is everything.
So there was Maxx Crosby from Content Day just talking about, what it means to him, continuing to grow, continuing to grind, his legacy, being a football player. I mean, everything. I mean, that's all it is for Maxx Crosby. And again, every team needs to have a guy like that, but the Raiders need to have about 2 or 3 guys like that. If they can get 2 or 3 guys like that, man, the team will be set. But of course, you can't just, you can't duplicate these type of guys. That's why Maxx Crosby is such a special, special dude. One final soundbite comes from Ted Wynn again from Friday. And I mentioned, as I said earlier here in this segment, about closing out games and making the big plays when the Raiders need them the most. Is that Maxx Crosby's next step as far as he's concerned?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, coverage and pass rush should go together, right? So you have better coverage. Those quarterbacks have to hold the ball a little longer, and that gives the defensive line more of an opportunity to hunt. So if the secondary improves and, he gets a little bit more help where teams can't just shift him and double team him and slide the protection towards him all the time, then, I think we're going to see those higher sack numbers come together.
So there's Ted right there just talking about, making those big plays. And again, the rest of the team having to step up and help make plays. The secondary, them being able to cover is going to be very important. Right? Obviously, getting the pass rush is going to be important, but they go hand in hand. We say it all the time. The secondary has got to be much improved. If they're not much improved, it doesn't matter how much Max is training, how much he's trying to, make that big play. The quarterback's going to be able to get the ball out of their hands. They can't cover forever. They will. If the quarterback gets the ball out of his hands quickly, that secondary guy's got to be able to make a play as well. And if that guy can cover, then they'll make the quarterback hold the ball a little bit longer and give Maxx Crosby a couple seconds to be able to get there. But as we know, as I mentioned, the corners can't hold, the corners can't cover forever, and Maxx Crosby's not going to be able to rush forever as far as I'm concerned. I mean, he can't get there in a second. he's going to have to get a little bit of help. So they've all got to really come together. But that's what I'm looking at. I talked about it on Friday, 40 and 20. I was talking about 40 sacks as a team and 20 interceptions as a team, and I'm looking at 15 sacks just for Maxx Crosby alone. And I think that should be reasonable expectations, not only 15 sacks, but some game-changing plays at the end of the game and be in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. I don't think that's a bad thing. Now, again, Defensive Player of the Year, you get that when your team wins, right? That's why it's a no-brainer when Nick Bosa gets it. So it's easy to say that, the numbers are going to put him there, but even when Khalil Mack won Defensive Player of the Year, what was it? The Raiders were in the playoffs, right? They were a 12-win team, and they were in the playoffs? I mean, it's just that simple. You've got to be able to win to be able to get some honors like that as well. But I think Max is well on his way to making that happen. So we'll see, obviously, what the season looks like once it gets started. Training camp is, just not too far away, a couple weeks away, and Mad Maxx Crosby will start putting in his 2023 NFL season campaign, and we'll see how that shakes out. So that's all I got for you for segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Before I get to that, though, I do want to tell you about our good friends at Birddogs. And it's funny, I just came back from vacation a couple weeks ago, and, man, having Birddogs and being able to slip those things on and go was a game changer. I mean, when you're in Hawaii, you think that you got to be all, super fashionable, and you don't have to be. You just have to be super comfortable. And the good thing about Birddogs is it was super fashionable and super comfortable at the same time, right? And it just makes you feel good. They're nice. They're stretchy. The khaki shorts. They have gym shorts. They have Oxford shorts. They have bathing suits that come in handy, liners. They have everything. All you got to do is go to birddogs.com, check out their collections. And, again, they're very, very comfortable, and comfort is always going to matter. The number one, right? That's going to be the most important thing. People ask me all the time, Q, what about the Birddogs, man? How do they feel? I say, man, they feel great. So I know our good friend, Dr. Jen, I think she's going to get her husband, Andy. I think she's going to get him some if she hasn't already. And if she hasn't already, then Andy, don't listen to that, because I probably was supposed to be a surprise. So my bad. But I just know, like, people tell me all the time, hey, man, good looking out. I got the Birddogs. Plus I got the little accessory cup that they have with it, the hookup that they have for you. So they've got a lot. All you got to do is go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL, enter the promo code LockedOnNFL, and you'll get that free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. Again, birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL, promo code LockedOnNFL for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and text straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Went a little long there in segment number 2, so I won't have as much time for calls and texts, but we'll get a couple in as we close out today's show. We'll start the first one off with Slots Ledoux from the 916. He's actually catching up on the pods and has something to say about the gambling situation. He's not really surprised by any of this. Here he is, Slots Ledoux.
Hey, Q, this is Slots Ledoux out of the 916. I might be a little late to the party. I'm still catching up on my podcasts. But as far as the gambling thing with the NFL, frankly, I'm not exactly sure what they expected when they completely embraced the whole sports betting thing. I mean, obviously this was going to be a problem. Like, frankly, this is, they might as well, have been suspending Josh Gordon while, advertising, marijuana, like on their whole, that they have Caesars Sportbook, they have FanDuel. I mean, all due respect, you have FanDuel, like they've been, trumpeting this whole sports betting thing while also trying to tell their players, hey, by the way, don't. Like, have they been trying to tell their players to not drink this entire time? Like, while, advertising Bud Light and everything? Like, it just seems really ridiculous. Maybe it's my own background in, I've worked in betting, like casino spaces and everything like that. Maybe it's just that I've seen what gambling can lead to and everything. But I mean, I've even heard of that they're trying to do sports books on WWE matches, which, I mean, I might as well gamble on the ending of the new Mission Impossible movie. Like, if you're gonna start legalizing gambling on professed fixed matches. I mean, I'm not even sure where this is going to end. I was against it when they started doing it. I think it's stupid now. I think it's stupid that they're, keeping, their players from doing it. I think it's ridiculous. I don't know why they even opened Pandora's box like that. I mean, obviously it was money, but I think it's just really, really silly. Anyways, that's my take on it. Thank you very much.
Slots, thanks for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And, yeah, it's something that I've talked about a few times when it comes to the NFL and the fact that they're making so much money off of, all the gambling, off all the, different sports books. And, they're so much in bed with gambling, but yet they are coming down on the players for gambling. So the players are looking at it like, wait, hold on, you're making money this way, but we can't make money. So it is. I think you said it perfectly. It's a Pandora's box. They knew that they were going to open it up when they did, and it's wide open like some old school TV antennas right now, and now they're trying to police it. And so that's why when I was talking about it on the show a few weeks back, I was talking about the fact that, one, their rules, I think, need to be a lot more clear. Like the NHL, I think, is perfect. The NHL says don't bet on the NHL. That's clear cut. That's it. So the NFL saying don't bet on the NFL, but then they have like 5 or 6 other rules that they're focused in on as well, where I think it should just be simple. Make it so a 6-year-old understands. Don't bet on the NFL. Okay, done. And if they choose to do it, then that's on them, right? That's on them. But if they have all these different rules that have so much gray area in it, it's just so hard sometimes to comprehend and understand. Again, sometimes some of these players just do some stupid stuff, and that's 100% on them. I'll never like defend them for that. But for the most part, they just got to figure out a way to clean things up and make it, like I said, make it understandable for a 6-year-old. Thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Up next, I got a text from Two Teeth Raider in Oklahoma. It says, hey, Q, it's Two Teeth Raider from Oklahoma. Been a listener since 2020. I'm just needing some advice, and I was hoping maybe you and some other dads could help me out. I'm blessed to say I just had a healthy baby boy, and he's everything I could have asked for. But without forcing him to do something he doesn't want to do, how do I make sure I raise him the right way and with all the encouragement of being a Raider fan? I know it's not that serious, LOL. I followed in my dad's footsteps and started watching the Raiders with him, and when he passed, I carried the Raider torch. Any advice for a first-time dad? Thank you, Q, for all you do, and thanks for always keeping it real. And P.S., I hear some Raider fans saying if you have any concerns or doubts about the team, then you're not a real fan, and I have to disagree. I believe being concerned about a player's health, position group, or even the head coach doesn't mean you're a fake fan. It means you're realistic. Thank you again. That's Two Teeth Raider in Oklahoma. Thanks for the text. And, man, congratulations on the birth of your baby boy. That's awesome. And I'll just say this. I don't know, like, I can't give you the advice of what to do. Like, I don't have a blueprint of what to do. I can just tell you what I did, right? I took my boys to the Raider games. They saw how passionate I was about it, how fired up I was about it. I introduced them to a lot of, my friends at the Coliseum or wherever the game was at. Introduced them to a bunch of Raider fans, and it ended up becoming just like a natural way of life. It wasn't even something like, hey, you have to do this, but they just kind of knew, and they looked at me, and they were excited, and like I said, going to games and having a good time, and it's just kind of was like, oh, yeah, this is what we do. We're Raider fans. Cool. Yeah, my dad's a Raider fan. We're Raider fans. And, just being able to have them at the games and seeing some victories and seeing the whole Coliseum celebrate. I mean, there's something that's infectious about that, and that's kind of what it is. It was the passion of the Raiders was so infectious that it just rubbed off on them, and they ran with it as well. So I think that's just really all you have to do. I don't think it's really too serious. Now, if your son comes home one day and says, I'm a Broncos fan or I'm a Chiefs fan or I'm a Charger fan, then something terribly went wrong, right? Something went wrong. But I think for the most part, as long as you show that passion and, you watch games with them and he watches games with you and that's something that you guys enjoy doing, then he'll do just like you did with your dad, and you'll just keep that Raider torch going, right? I think that's the best way to put it. But thank you so much for that text. I do appreciate you. Got a call from Raider Eddie in Denver. He's calling to respond to Army Raiders' call about the Patriot Way. Here he is, Raider Eddie in Denver.
Hey, Q, what's up? This is Raider Eddie in Denver. Happy Friday. I want to follow up to Army Raiders' call on the Patriot Way and how the Patriot Way hasn't worked in any circumstance outside of having Brady as a quarterback. I think the critique is full of assumptions, and the main assumption seems to be that the Patriot Way is something you can put in a bottle, take it with you over to wherever team, and then see if it works there. And that's just not how this Patriot Way thing, that's just not what that truly is. When I think about the Patriot Way, I think there are certain methods that they use And one is putting the team over individual players. I think it's the way they manage their cap. I think it's the way they have a level of discipline and avoiding mistakes in the way they play. It's also the type of player that they look for to execute their system. So it's not something you can just say, hey, it hasn't worked in other places. What you need to consider is what pieces of it have been implemented in other places. And another thing about that is you can't just transplant culture from team to team. I'm going to lean on what you said, Q, and you said, Ziegler hopefully is going to tweak his own approach to team building to fit what we have here in Vegas. And I think that's exactly what he needs to do. I think this Patriot Way thing, it's a little, the critique on Patriot Way, it's a little kind of lazy. Like I said, full of assumptions, and it's not realistic. I don't think anyone's trying to duplicate that exactly. But the last thing I'll say is there do seem to be some traits that have resulted in many years of playoff football for the Patriots. So why not try to duplicate some of those traits and methods? And Q, have a great Friday, and talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you so much for the call. I appreciate you. And, yeah, I mean, we've gone over the Patriot Way before, and multiple Patriot players or coaches have just said it's not really a Patriot way. It's just a winning way. It's just, as you kind of broke down, smart things to do when it comes to playing games and running the organization. Now, I'll say this. The biggest thing that we were talking about last week when Army Raider called in, it was more about the coaches and GMs that have left the organization in New England and have tried to have success outside, and it really hasn't happened. That's what I'm hoping that Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels could prove wrong. Like, they can join this Raiders organization and have success, turn this thing around, have success, and kind of break that myth. It's almost like the Madden curse, right? Until it's proven that it's not really a curse, it's a curse, right? So until it's proven that guys can leave the Patriots organization and have success outside the building, it's one of those things that it feels like that's how it is. So I'm hoping that Ziegler and McDaniels can turn things around quick, fast, and in a hurry for the Raiders and prove that, yeah, you can leave New England and still have success. But Raider Eddie, thanks for that call. I do appreciate you. Got time for about one more. We'll take a text from Scott. He said, the numbers I had in my head when we were talking about the number game, when we were talking about the defensive goals, were 2.5 sacks a game, which works out to 42 and a half in the regular season, basically on par with your goal, which my goal was 40 sacks. As far as picks, I'm looking at it a little differently. Secondary and pass rush go hand in hand, and if the pass rush is really effective, it could help or limit the pick numbers. So basically, I'm looking for them to average over plus 0.5 in turnover differential per game over the course of the season. That would put them at roughly +9 at the end of the season and would likely land them squarely in the middle of the playoff picture. That's a text from Scott. I do appreciate you. And yeah, the thing about it is, I think that the secondary has to have a goal. I think they have to have a goal for interceptions, right? I mean, you're absolutely right when it comes to the front, the defensive line and the secondary working hand in hand, spot on. You're right. But if those guys in the back end, the corners and the safeties don't have goals, and a certain number that they're trying to achieve, then it's just, I feel like it's going to fall short, right? And it's going to be another one of those lackluster seasons. Like, they need to be in their mind looking to go make that play. And then let the chips fall where they may. So that's why I say 20 interceptions, just like Eric Allen said that Willie Brown, Willie Shaw, his old defensive coordinator when he was with the Raiders, that was his goal, 20 interceptions every single year. And I think that's what it should be. And I went over the numbers on Friday's show for the teams that were in the playoffs in 2022, and I believe only the 49ers really had 20 interceptions, but that's okay. If you get 15, 16, 13, that's cool. But six just ain't going to cut it. So, Scott, thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate you, and I like the way that you're thinking as far as the 42.5 regular season sacks for the silver and black. And, again, going back to segment number 2, if Maxx Crosby can get at least 15, then you're already off to a really good start. But that's all I got for you for today's show. Coming up tomorrow, I got a call from Nathan Glass from Cali, a text from MJ in Tucson. Plus, we'll have a lot more. Plus, we'll have some news and notes. And, of course, plenty of good conversation here as we do each and every day on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So, until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.